I think this is really a story about when conformity meets authenticity, I guess, in a lot of ways. And again, like, it's really reductive and foolish to kind of say that, like, everything that happens in this era and in the city was a direct result of, Rasheed, Bonzi, and Damon, and those players coming into, quote unquote, what many consider to be like the whitest city in America. And that's too reductive and not accurate. I mean, if you go back, I was reading everything for this, so I'm going back and reading Breaks of the Game by David Halberstam. I'm reading Wayne Thompson's book Blazer Mania. I'm reading all these different things. Kerry Eggers' book J.O. Blazers, fascinating. And when you go back in the 70s, fans were...
Hi everyone, Tim Kitzer with you, the voice of NBA Jam. From top journalists and authors to rising influencers and insiders, Hoopsology brings you the voices driving basketball forward. With elite guests and sharp analysis, Matt, Justin, and Alan keep you plugged into everything hoops. From downtown, boom shakalaka.
You mentioned, we were chatting off air about this era of the Portland Trail Blazers, how you wanted the players want to get their side of the story. And I feel like these players get a really bad rap, but this is really a critical juncture of really the NBA. Like you mentioned, Rick, so closely, after the Jordan era, that was such a huge era for the NBA, transitioning to this new era that's about to transpire with LeBron and afterwards. But with the Jailblazers, I feel like it's an underrated part of just hoops history. So can you just go over how this project was presented to you, you putting it together, and the journey for kind of seeing it as a concept to what we're going to see on Netflix pretty soon?
Yeah. So I was actually just finishing working on the Celtic City doc series for HBO, the 9-part series about the Celtics, and my producer my co-executive producer Jake, and the showrunner Ryan Duffy, who I knew from working on the Jeter doc, The Captain, because he helped us with, he used to work at the Players Tribune, and he helped us with a lot of great archives. He reached out and said, I basically have a story that I think is right in your wheelhouse, and he was right. I mean, my family is really close with Maurice Cheeks, and I remember, when he first took over in 2001, and I was spoiled. He would hook me up with some tickets when he was in town, and I got to see these guys behind the scenes. And I was about to be a teenager. This is right when I think sports culture was starting to kind of get into that like monolith of the 24/7 news cycle, and these perceptions and things were kind of starting to be known about these guys. And so I definitely was nervous about like that after game pass. I was like, is Rasheed going to hate me, these guys? But they're amazing guys to me, and they don't remember that time at all because, they're NBA players, but it meant a lot to me. And I did a few things with the Blazers in the past. There was a show called Enhanced on ESPN Plus, and I had an episode that profiled CJ McCollum. I just fell in love with CJ, his family, his mom, his dad opened us with open arms into their home in Ohio, and profiled him and his brother Eric. And so always, had a weird kind of tangential connection to the Blazers. But I think what's really fascinating is I think a lot of times in the sports doc space, we have to be kind of careful. And I think recently too, I know Bill Simmons is famous for basically calling a lot of these things documercials, and, basically saying that like, everything now is from the player's perspective. Everything now is, trying to get their version of events. But that's not what happened. What really happened is, and then insert like 5,000 transactions, or insert, an article linking to all these different things. And I just felt like with this team, and notably Rasheed, Bonzi, and Damon, they've never really had an opportunity. I think it just like very coherently and very clearly kind of gets a lot of their thoughts about this era and what they did on and off the court out into the open. And I think that, we as a creative team were very cognizant of, not retconning, not rewriting history, not, basically just kind of giving things from, one side of things. Like, we have the players in this documentary. We have Bob Whitsitt. Bob Whitsitt, the general manager, sat down. And again, he is also a person who has received both praise and criticism for how he handled how he handled the team. But again, you look at that era, I believe they were like the 5th winningest team in the league at that time, from like, I think 94 to 03, which was Bob's era. And so it's hard to go against that. It's hard to say that, this team was bad or did a bad job, but obviously you have their demeanor, the technicals, the off court stuff to take, to take into account, and that colored the perception of things. But I really think that, this is really a story. You have the basketball story. You have, like I said, back-to-back Western Conference Finals, 1 quarter away from being in the finals, 1 quarter away from arguably rewriting the entire landscape of the NBA from that point. Because if they win, maybe Kobe and Shaq gets broken up because, they hadn't done anything to that point, and yada, yada, yada. We always love the what-if game. But it really, to me, was a story about perception. I think about who gets the bulk of the pie and determining how athletes are perceived. And I get it. I'm a fan myself, although I'm not as obsessive as some other people are. I'm a Chicago born and bred person, but I'm a Packer fan. I hate the Bears, right? And so it's weird, and I get crap for it all the time, but my first football experience was seeing Brett Favre torch us for 28 points in the first half, and I was like, I like that team. And then my mom's like, well, you're not going to like them once he's gone. And I was like, oh no, I like Aaron Rodgers, I like Jordan Love. I'm going to stick with him. But you can choose, your agency as a fan. And that's being spoiled in Chicago with all these different sports, all these different teams, and Portland just has the one. And I think that when you have a city like that, for better or for worse, there's a level of connection between fans and the media and everything that is unlike anything else in the city that doesn't have this one sport. And I think you saw a lot of things internalized and a lot of, standards and expectations that were put on this team. And this team was very, very, very clear that they were not going to conform to those expectations or beliefs. And so you had this tension that I just think surrounded this entire, 9-year stretch that these guys, were all a part of this team. And I just thought it was a fascinating way to kind of just really look inwardly as fans, as media. We interview the players, the GM, fans, the media. We try to hit it from every angle. And I think that ultimately, my whole thing is that when you get trapped into I kind of like to think of opinions as kind of jars on the shelf, and we like to trap ourselves in them. And the only way you could really understand it is to unscrew the lid and kind of see it from the outside. And I'm hoping that by showing these guys and their stories and their takes on things that, perhaps people come away with a different side of things, because we definitely hold them accountable and we definitely challenge them. And it's not a hagiography and it's not a retconning in any shape or the form. But I do think there's a lot of different things that people just weren't privy to or didn't understand from their perspective. And I hope that sharing this with the world allows them to kind of just get a different look at their careers, because they were amazing basketball players and it was a very successful team, even though it didn't bring home a title.
Well, I echo your sentiments just about with Portland only having one professional team. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They have no professional sports team. Everything's centered around college. So a lot of scrutiny goes on college kids. So I moved to Denver within the last 5 years, and there's a bunch of pro sports teams here. Everybody's attention is split. So I get where you're coming from in terms of the Trailblazers, how important that team is to that community. So when you're talking to the players that were featured in your documentary, how was it in terms of your chemistry with them, trying to draw out these memories? I even saw in the documentary trailer that the community turned on them. That's what I heard from one player. So how was it in terms of you're bringing up a lot of painful memories that these players have to live through, even though this was a big part of their career? How was it that in terms of creating trust with the people that you were talking to?
I think, the three main stars of the film are Rasheed, Bonzi, and Damon. And then I'd say 4, and Bob. I think Bob is definitely a star in this film, and I think it was different with each person. I think, Rasheed is down for anything and he's candid about everything, so it doesn't take much to kind of, even if you mention something that's not flattering or perhaps you think, is this going to piss him off or is this going to bring back some, he's completely fine. Everything was on the table. Bonzi was more or less the same way. Damon is very stoic and very reserved and controlled. But when we were talking about his marijuana incident with his second marijuana incident, his first marijuana incident with the police investigation at his home, that was later found to be done unlawfully because the house, the burglar alarm went off. They entered, and then they basically tore up the entire home and found the amount of weed that they did, and ultimately the case got thrown out because of that. He was very candid about that, and I think that exchange opened up some trust with me to kind of like, oh, we're going into this, and I'm allowed to kind of talk about this, immediately selling my home after that because it was so traumatic and I wanted nothing to do with it. It was really revelatory, and Bob again was very he's an intelligent man. He's a very he stands by his conviction. There were things that he admitted perhaps he would not have done. There were things that he still doubles down on. And I think there's one exchange in the film between he and I that, I think might be interpreted as a little heated. I would definitely, I think we were both just kind of, heated is too strong. I think it's a criticism about, it was a question dealing about Ruben Patterson, like bringing Ruben Patterson into the fray, and kind of altering the existing team chemistry in the years following the Western Conference Finals when, again, they're 1 quarter away, they're 15-point lead that gets tragically blown. Bob definitely made some moves afterwards, which as he should want to. He wants to get into this team that's on the precipice of being a title contender, furthering them along. And, some of the players felt like maybe we shouldn't trade Jermaine O'Neal, or maybe we shouldn't bring Sean Kemp into the fray, or maybe, we should have gotten rid of Dunleavy sooner, or yada, yada, yada. But I think, for me, the one exchange that really stood out with Rasheed was it was more kind of like an off-camera thing. Didn't make it into the film, but it definitely colored the film or some of my perspectives in the film when I read him a letter that a fan wrote to the Oregonian. So he got traded obviously to Atlanta and then Detroit, and that he wins the title like 4 months afterwards with Detroit. And I think they won the title in the middle of June, and he's celebrating and, thank you. He has that iconic, he goes to the rally where he's basically just thanking the fans of Detroit for accepting him and etc. And then I think a couple weeks afterwards, a fan wrote a letter to the Oregonian, and I think the title of the letter was "Wallace has the ring, but he's still a loser" to this fan. And I'll never forget saying, I told Rasheed that this guy said that as much as we hate the Lakers, it was harder for us to see you win than the Lakers win. You're the worst thing that ever happened to this franchise. You're never welcome back here. There's no love for you here. And, when Rasheed heard that and told me that, he definitely took that we were on break and he took that into the interview. And there's a very memorable moment at the end of the film because obviously this team had a reunion to honor this team. And I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't want to speak on his behalf. But that reunion happened right before Christmas. It was a home game against the Pistons in the Moda Center. And, everybody made it basically but Rasheed. And a couple days before that, he was honored in Detroit. He was inducted into the Michigan Sports Hall of Fame for his time with the Pistons, and he chose to go to that. And then, 3 days later, chose not to go to the Portland reunion. And, he could better speak to maybe any intention behind that, but it's really hard personally for me to kind of see the course of his career in Portland, hear some of the exchanges that we have, and not feel that that somehow colored that decision. And I know he's still tight with Damon and Bonzi and those guys, but it was very revelatory to me that he didn't go. And again, I don't want to put words in his mouth because again, he was adamantly, profusely positive about his experience overall in Portland, the love that he had with the fans, the connection he had with the fans. But I do think a lot of this definitely weighed on him and has weighed on him, and maybe perhaps colored some of that decisions to not go. Yeah.
So through your work through this documentary and then with Celtic City, what do you think fans should really, appreciate more just about the athletes that they see on a daily basis? And I think it's only gotten worse because of gambling, in terms of that dissociated mindset that these athletes are humans, right?
Yeah.
They do the same things that we do, but their profession is seen in front of millions of people. And I feel like fans forget about that. They treat them as just commodities or as just, it's a very materialistic approach to viewing human beings where, these people, I know it's corny to say, but they have feelings too. And,
Yeah.
when you're putting your blood, sweat, and tears into something for a long time and you're trying everything in your power to make it happen, and it's a sports. I mean, it comes down to a millimeter as a mistake, or just even in terms of not even a mistake. You try your hardest and it doesn't happen. And yet these fans are very vicious in terms of how they feel. And I feel like they feel ownership over these players. What do you, just through your documentary work, how do you feel in terms of just these athletes that you're talking to, their relationship with fans? Do you just wish fans would just appreciate athletes more in terms of, just the effort they put on, on the court or field, on a daily basis? Because I just hear what you told me about was Rasheed Wallace, and he's a very polarizing figure throughout his career. But at the same time, just in terms of a fan taking the time to write a letter and disrespect them like that, I mean, I feel his sentiments in terms of, what? I gave it everything I had, and you're going to disrespect me. I mean, these guys are humans. So just how do you just approach that in terms of just hearing these stories and how you feel about fans after, your documentary work?
It's really tough. And ultimately, I think it's multifaceted in the sense of, like, I don't necessarily think it's just on fans. I think it's just kind of blend of fans, media, you name it. But like, I do think that I get it. Look, I mean, they're making multiple millions of dollars. They live the quote unquote dream life. They are playing something that they've loved their entire lives for a career, and get to just kind of travel the country, travel the world, get to, never pay for a drink or a meal, yada, yada, yada. But they are humans. And I think that point that you made is valid. I think it was important in this film that we didn't excuse, but we wanted to humanize. And I think that, imagine Rasheed made the point in the documentary, like, to the sports writers who criticized him, like, what if I came to your job and I was like, you're using the wrong punctuation, or you're using this or using that? Like, what if, I'm watching The Pit and, Noah Wiley's doing a surgery and he's got, some message board being like, you're doing this wrong, you're an idiot, you're like whatever. I mean, like, everybody has the luxury to go, well, not everybody, most people have the luxury to go through their life without having a microscope on them or being criticized for how they live their lives, how they do their job, how they take care of their family, so on and so forth. And athletes are supposed to be just and not just athletes, musicians, actors, filmmakers, they're supposed to be a separate tier of individual, or like, if this is the cost of doing business, yeah. Like, I'm sure you're sad and you're going to therapy and trying to get through your things, but net worth is still north of 100 million. I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. And so, I don't know. I think with, like, everything that I try to do, I just want to try to bridge those things, because I don't think it's either black or white. It is gray, obviously. And I just think that, like, a lot of times we lose that perspective of what these guys went through. And, there's a lot of stuff going on in their lives that didn't make the cut. But, again, you could research it, but just like personal, whether it's child custody, whether it's, just on and off the court things that are obviously impacting their day to day as NBA players. I think there has to be that level of sympathy and empathy and understanding, and ultimately, like, look inwardly, like, what do you want sports to be in your life? Like, I grew up a diehard Bulls fan. You expect me to be happy with the current product and the current situation and a front office that I thought was going to be better than Garpax, and it's worse? Like, no, of course not. Like, I'm livid. But then you take a step back and you're like, well, okay, I'm mad, but, like, it's not going to affect my day to day, and I'm going to get by on it. And if anything, it's made me broaden my horizons, where I'm not just having a myopic one team, reading everything and following one team. I look at the league as a whole, and it's been kind of freeing. Like, the Bulls' ineptitude has allowed me to spend more time watching Anthony Edwards, Jokic, the Lakers with, LeBron coming back now and Luka killing all, and it's more enjoyable for me. So, like, I'm not complaining, but I wish more people would kind of take that approach, because ultimately it is entertainment, it is a business, it is a conglomeration, it is all these things on top of just being a game. and there's so much to consider. And I just think we need to kind of let our fandom not ever take the place of just empathy with another person.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a huge Bulls fan too, so don't get me started on that team. If everything that you say, we can go on another hour just talking about that. And I feel you in terms of like, especially with football, like I'm a huge 49ers fan, but it's refreshing when they're not in the Super Bowl because I can just enjoy it. There's no pressure.
Right.
I don't have to worry about it. It's a lot more just stressful when there's teams I'm rooting for. When it's in, it kind of takes the enjoyment out of it. So I 100% get where you're coming from. Last question for you, for those who, they check out the documentary, what is kind of the prevailing theme that you want people to have once they're done viewing your film?
It's a good question. I think that ultimately, really good question. I think this is really a story about when conformity meets authenticity, I guess, in a lot of ways. And again, like, it's really reductive and foolish to kind of say that, like, everything that happened in this era and in the city was a direct result of, Rasheed, Bonzi, and Damon, and those players coming into, quote unquote, what many consider to be like the whitest city in America, and that's too reductive and not accurate. I mean, if you go back, I was reading everything for this, so I'm going back and reading Breaks of the Game by David Halberstam. I'm reading Wayne Thompson's book Blazer Mania. I'm reading all these different things. Kerry Eggers' book J.O. Blazers, fascinating. And you go back in the 70s, fans were not happy with Bill Walton, right? And he's a white guy, and they weren't happy because of the injuries. They weren't happy with his on and off again, relationship with the Blazers front office and their medical staff. When he left to go to the Clippers, there were people saying Bill Walton's a Grateful Dead fan. We'd be grateful that he's dead, like blah 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 blah. And again, like, he is the iconic, white star of a predominantly, in a predominantly white city, and he was still getting subject to criticism and things like that. But I do think if you take a larger, broader thing about like race, and you make it more though about like conformity and expectation and how people feel you should behave as an athlete or as a representative of the city, and to see kind of how that often butts directly against people who just authentically want to live their lives the way they live it, be who they want to be, act how they want to act, care for their family the way they want to do, play the game of basketball. I think that's really what the film is about, and just the perception of these guys and who gets to control that. Do the players do it? Do the media? Is it the pen mightier than anything else in this? Is it the fans? And I think it's just a real interesting look at all of that. And I hope, I don't think we try to be too heavy-handed with it. I think it's a lot of the stuff is open to interpretation by, how people feel or what they personally align themselves with. But I think that's what it's really unpacking in a lot of ways. It's not just about the basketball. It's not just about great team, one of the greatest teams that never won a title. It's really about athletes who are humans and struggling and succeeding just like everybody else does. And, just unpacking that in the context of Portland and the NBA at that time. Yeah.
Sascha, thank you very much for joining me. Truly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Can you let our audience know if you're located on social media, again, where they can catch out the documentary, and then any upcoming projects you might be working on as well?
Yeah, I'm the rare millennial who's not on Instagram. I am on Twitter with my resounding 80 followers or so. I think it's at Butternut Squasha. It's a weird spelling of my name, but you'll see my photo, and I have a little Portland thing in the background from the CJ thing, so that's me. And yeah, what's in the horizon? I'm currently working on a project that I probably shouldn't disclose, but it's definitely about one of the 75 greatest basketball players of all time, and he played for the New York Knicks in the majority of his career. So I'll let people maybe put two and two together. Yeah, I'm always looking for the next one, but this one, it's been really fascinating to go from Derek Jeter and the captain to from an individual sense to the Celtics as a team, multi-decade, look at a franchise and their legacy, and now to a team that has that's not really, quote unquote glorified or has a checkered into. So I think I'm constantly trying to, not do the same thing, try to change it up a little bit. But I'm hoping, we'll see when this drops. Maybe maybe some things will come my way, I hope. But we'll see. I'm just really excited for people to check it out. And my team, the people at Netflix, the people at Propagate, we're just amazing. The Propagate Content, the company that makes the Untolds, were just incredibly helpful and could not have made this without their contributions. And I'm really excited for everybody to see it.
Thank you very much for the time. Truly appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem, Justin. Thank you.